What's up, guys? It's John Dominique, the Soul Proponent, and today I want to talk about the importance of flexibility on the path to the soul. It's very important on the passage of the soul to be able to adapt. You need to be malleable. You need to be able to be that good soil that Jesus talked about in the parable of the seed of the farmer sowing seeds. You have to be that good soil. This is not a very easy thing to do because basically the personality is anti-flexible. Its job is to survive. It's to concretize itself. It wants to make its own rules. It wants not to budge. It wants to be the boss, pretty much. And the path requires us being able to let go of that need, let go of the desire to call the shots. It's not an easy thing to do. There's very little know-how and very little information as to how to go about this. And it takes a very extreme type of attitude of flexibility to the point where you have to be willing to be able to change your career, change where you live, change the people you hang around. All these things are going to, change on their own naturally. And you have to be willing to allow that to happen. And that's part of being flexible, the willingness to be flexible. Because most people aren't willing to do what it takes to go to the extreme to have their awakening. For instance, just the fact of religion, wanting to be a good Christian, because I came from that background as well. The need to be a Christian can be a barrier because it's not flexible. Being a Christian is like, okay, you have to have these beliefs, right? If you go outside of these, if you color outside these lines, if you go outside these beliefs, then you're not a Christian anymore. People treat you as, an outcast. You're considered somebody who's going to hell. And that's one thing we need to see as well. The love of the crowd, peer pressure, and the need to be accepted and loved by a group of people, such as, Christians or Catholics, is a barrier as well. It can be a barrier. It was for me, because it was so important for me to not be considered a heretic, not to be someone who would be looked down upon by my family because I stepped outside of the religion I was raised in. And that's like a shameful thing. People treat you as, someone who did something wrong and not to be associated with anymore. That need and that desire to stay within the realms of what's safe, of what's known, to be a Catholic, to be a Christian, to be associated with that peer group, it's a barrier because you're not flexible. You're saying it's the love of men is more important than the love of God, pretty much. So that's one example, and there's multiple other examples. What I'm saying basically is that you got to be flexible on the path because you don't know what's going to happen. Basically, it's letting go of your identity of who you think you are. And this identity is very, we're fixated on this identity. First of all, it's very difficult to just be aware of how fixated we are because you can't let go. You feel like there's no possible way you can let go of this identity of who you think you are. This identity is, you can't lose it. If you lose it, like you feel you're gonna die, basically, and nobody wants to be made to feel that way. And this has to happen multiple times. It's not just like, I wanna try to let go of this identity once or twice. It's ongoing, and it's a non-stop process. So, some people will do it, maybe for 3 weeks, and then it gets old after a while. It gets too difficult, and then you just kind of give up. But again, the need to be able to be flexible on this path is important. Because what can happen is you can just pick up from where you left off, you know, take a little break. That's what you want to do. And just suspend that for a while, take a little break and then come back to it. That's part of being flexible. Not giving up and just saying, okay, well, this is as far as I can go. And then you take it as far as you can go, and then you come back to it when you're ready. That's part of being flexible. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not like you have to do it all at once, because it takes a long time. It's a process. So you do it in little parts and little chunks. You do the best you can with what you got. And if it takes you having to, you know, renounce your family, having to turn your back on your friends and the people you hang around with and all that, that's what has to happen. Right? The flexibility, again, you have to take it to an extreme level, to the point where you're going to be alone most of the time. This is what's going to happen, because on the path of the soul is very, very lonely. There's no unconscious unconscious action of, oh, I'm going to go hang out with my friends to distract myself. There's no, I want to smoke some cigarettes, or I'm going to go and eat a whole bowl of ice cream, a whole tub of ice cream, a gallon of ice cream, or whatever. Because the ego has these compulsions. It has ways of avoiding this flexibility and avoiding the path of the soul. Basically, everything is a distraction. So the flexibility part is first seeing how all these things that the ego is trying to do is a distraction. You know, overworking too much, getting wrapped up in other people's lives and wanting to help other people, you know, to a point where it's distracting you from being alone, being silent, going into the stillness, going into the darkness, into that path, because that's what the path is and that's where it takes you. And again, the ego will find ways to not do this. It'll distract itself anyway. And ultimately, the ego does a good job at finding its own way of getting its own value and self-worth. But it does it in the wrong, it doesn't know, it's very unconscious, so it doesn't really know that this is a thing. So you have to remain flexible and see that a substitute for your self-worth can't do the job. Most people think what's more important than their self-worth is not feeling the pain of lack of self-worth. That's the thing of the path. You have to feel the entirety of your lack of self-worth in order to know your self-worth. So that's part of being flexible on the path of the soul. This is not a game. It's not something, you know, that you could just pretend to do it. You can't fake it, right? It's a real thing. Just got to understand it's important on the path of the soul to remain flexible, be malleable, and you have to be pliable. You have to remain like that that ground that Jesus spoke about in the parable of the seed, the sower sowing seeds. You have to be fertile. So those seeds and that ground, you have to make sure that you're able to accept and not deny and not reject on an unconscious level your lack of self-worth and everything that's required on the path of the soul, because it's a very counterintuitive path. And people easily find ways and excuses not to do it because it's very, very difficult. But if you remain flexible, you can learn, you can grow, you can get better, you can make progress. Don't ever quit on it, man. John Dominique, the Soul Proponent. Peace.